Hey, y'all doing? Hey,
Hi,
hi, Imani. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to talk to you. I always love talking to you. I feel like every time I talk to you, I learn so much, and I feel invigorated about like books and reading and study and research. Like I feel like the nerd inside me just comes to life.
That's good. We like the nerd vibe. Well, I am so grateful to be in conversation with you. And before we even start, I just want to thank you for all that you do to nurture our community. Um, you know, a community of readers and writers and freedom dreamers and and cultural workers. It means a lot, and I have been in deep admiration of you for a long time, so I'm really happy to be able to say that publicly, and I'm so grateful that we can talk about Ntozake together.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I love words of affirmation. I'm not gonna lie.
We need them. We have
Woo. I love it. And I do remember, and I will always remember the fact that you've been a supporter of the Free Black Women's Library for years now. Because I remember when your book about Lorraine Hansberry came out, and you came all the way from Philly to talk to us about that book in that weird little church storefront. I don't even know what that place was. This
It
was
was
before
wonderful.
we had a storefront space, so I would just jump into like whatever free spaces I could find that felt accessible to the community. And you came, and it was such a beautiful conversation.
We had a great conversation.
It was
Yeah,
so good. It
yeah,
was so good, it made me it made me further investigate Lorraine Hansberry as an artist, like as a writer and activist outside
yeah,
of the
yeah.
iconic Raising the Sun play.
There's so
So, yeah, I appreciate you doing that work. So, I do have some questions
oh,
prepared,
okay.
and one of them is actually connected to the work. But I think I'll save that for later. So,
Okay.
first of all, I want to tell whoever's watching, just in case you didn't know, that we are talking about why we're here is because of this new book, Sing a
Mhm.
Black Girl Song, which is a nice, thick, juicy work featuring Ntozake Shange's unpublished works, edited by Imani Perry, forward by Tarana Burke, double Virgo, whammy, pow, pow.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. So this is why we're here. And I wanted to ask you, how did this book come to be?
Yeah. So this is a great question, because, and I talked a little bit about this last night, but I want to sort of project this into the world. So this was a project that came to me. Um, the folks at Legacy Lit and from the Trust reached out and asked if I would be interested in editing this collection. And I want to say I would not have ever thought of it, not because I didn't know that this was an essential thing to happen, but I wouldn't have had the courage to propose a project like this, to think of myself as someone to do a project like this. And in some ways, it was just such an incredible blessing. I have been thinking a lot since starting to work on it about how critical Shange has been over the course of my life. I remember her words first out of my mother's mouth, and she used to perform the Lady in Green at like poetry readings, kind of
Oh,
like that
wow.
sort of 70s energy. There was a poet at that time, but she would also do other people's poetry, and she used to do the Lady in Green. And then when I was in elementary school, I read Sassafras, Cypress, and Indigo, and I
Mm,
so deeply identified with the character Indigo, and I would just read the sections about her over and over and over again. This sort of like this girl child who was precocious, but also, you know, had started her period, but still played with dolls and had a tea party for the dolls having their period, and liked it and hung out with a group of boys, and like had that side to her too, and was and liked elderly people. And I was like, it was like finding myself on the page. And so all of that to say, the project came to me. I did not have time, but I made time because she is such a beloved person to me and a beloved ancestor, I think, for so many of us, and sang our songs, right? And was so brilliant and so vast and so just like she acted with so much courage. And I think for me to have this project fall into my lap was in some way it felt like an encouragement to move with more courage through life as well. And so, yeah, it just was sort of magical.
I love it. That's my favorite type of magic. That's my favorite type of magic. And yet you actually touched on one of my other questions, which was, where were you when you first encountered Ntozake Shange's work, and like, how did that feel for you?
Yeah.
I definitely relate and resonate with Sassafras, Cypress, and Indigo. Because I was like, who is this woman? Where did she come from? Why is she writing my life? She's writing all the things I feel. This is so amazing. That book blew me away. But yeah, but you said your mom was performing?
Yeah, she would, you know, it's hard. It's like that thing in the 70s was so weird and wonderful, right? Like, so people would just get together and hang out for hours, and, you know, kids, we were just kind of hanging around, like some falling asleep on the coats, but like, you know, people would talk revolution and do poetry and perform and, you know, smoke and drink. And I just, you know, I was too young to fully comprehend what it meant to talk about somebody walking off with all of your stuff, right?
Right.
But it, for I do think that the message that it was meaningful to have something of your own, to be self-possessed, to protect what one had, as a Black woman, was such, for me, an important lesson as a child, to have that communicated.
Yeah.
And I, you know, and I think about how often, you know, we come of age and we hear the words of For Colored Girls in so many different contexts over and over again, right? And that there's something about that it's a kind of, you know, Nikki Finney says repetition is holy, right? There's a holiness to that repetition of hearing our memories and having a sort of testimony, the chorus of voices. And so, so I feel like I've heard her my whole life, but these pieces are amazing because we haven't read them before, and they're so beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm actually, I just started reading the book, but I'm actually very amazed by the quality of her writing from such a young age. Like, this is somebody who was tapped in
Yes.
to her writer self.
Yes, young. There.
Yeah. Yeah. But how, so I'm, you know, I'm a wannabe archivist, and I'm just curious to know.
But you are one. But okay.
I am. I guess because I'm kind of willy-nilly with it. But I'm curious to know, how does it feel to go through someone's archives? Because this is something that you do often in your work, right?
Yeah.
So, and that feels like really sacred, special, like holy work. So, like, how does that feel from the outside looking in? I haven't experienced it, but I just wonder about it sometimes.
It's intensely spiritual. I mean, I remember, you know, sort of these pilgrimages to Harlem, right? So first it was spending time with these pieces of paper that were in Lorraine's hands, and then pieces of paper that were in Ntozake's hands. And part of what is so extraordinary about it is, one, it's very clear, right, when you touch the work of these geniuses, right, that there's something that it's charged, right? There's a kind of spiritual charge to touch, but also you understand how deeply human the work of creating was, so that you read their vulnerability, their intimate thoughts, their question marks, the worry about, can I afford this or that, the how do I take care of the people I love, those pieces as integral to the creative process, not as, I think so often we are impeded, I think, as Black women in doing the things that we feel called to do. But there's something about the particularity of our experiences and our adversities that actually makes our work extraordinary, right? We have testimony that is precious. And so for me, like, part of it is the magic of being blown away, right? Like, oh, this, like, of her thoughts and her process, but also realizing this is a very human process to bring this kind of work, right? And it comes with all the vulnerability of human beings, all the fragility of her as a human being. So I have, I try to be very present when I'm in the archive, tapped in spiritually. I wash my hands a lot. I mean, you're supposed to wash your hands a lot, but also there's a kind of, like, the kind of process of, like, cleansing it in preparation. And there's various ways that happens almost organically for me. And it's just, it's such an extraordinary gift. I keep thinking now, like, what it means to be both, a teller of stories and a keeper of stories. And I think that's what the archive does. Like, and so often the keepers of stories are not, we don't attend to that quiet part nearly enough, but it's actually sort of the crux of the tradition, right? What does it mean to hold on to the tradition? So yes, I'm so grateful for the folks at Barnard. And sorry, there's teenage boys in my house. They're like talking in the background. Sorry. Yeah, and they have opened their doors for people to come in and spend time with her papers as well, which is extraordinary. So yeah, it's good stuff.
It is amazing, and from what I understand, it's not just her writing that's there; it's also, like, her journals. And I just wonder, like, that sense of freedom, that sense of just releasing all your business. Like, I feel like that takes such courage.
It does.
And I wonder, but there's something very liberating about that too. And there's also something very humanizing about that, because it's like, here I am, I'm a genius, I'm literally genius, but I'm a mess too sometimes.
Right.
I fall apart, I get depressed, act out.
Yes.
And those are good things to hear.
So,
right?
Yeah, good things to hear, to witness. And also, I don't know if you have this experience. And people journal in different ways, but I journal when I'm really struggling. So I'm always thinking, like, if people see my journals, they will think I am, like, the most miserable person on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
So there's a vulnerability too, because even when you journal, it's a portion of your life, because it has a particular function, right? Like, it's doing some kind of work.
It's like getting it out.
Yeah.
It's like a processing of intense emotion.
So there's also a letting go to allow part that we'll never know all of her, but that she lets us know the parts of her that are not, like, weren't totally disciplined, it's a gift. I mean, she just gave so much. Just a lifetime of just so much generosity. It's incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. And I like the fact that more people will be introduced to her work through this.
Yeah.
Because I personally feel like she's a little underrated. I feel like she's not talked about enough.
I agree.
I really appreciate the way she manipulates the English language and really turns it into like a, it's like AAVE, but it's like Southern, and it's
And
like
it's
hip hop.
hard.
It's hip hop and it's performance. It's like, it's a bunch of stuff together.
Yep.
And I think that's something folks need to see, especially people who are interested in being writers and don't necessarily feel drawn to use like correct grammar.
Yeah.
So that's part of why I'm excited about this book. But my question, when it came, a question I had about the archives as well was like, are there certain things that you do not include because you feel like they don't,
Yeah.
I hate using this type of language, but serve the story. I hate using that type of language, but I
Yeah.
don't know how else to say it. I just wonder about
Mhm.
the editing process. Like, how do you make that decision?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm part of, I think for every person who undertakes this kind of project, you have to have a kind of gentleness with yourself and understanding that you have one approach among many possible approaches. And so to me, I was like, well, we don't have an autobiography from her. So the pieces I was hoping would in some way function like her autobiographical story.
Mm.
It would have an arc uh, of her kind of storytelling of her life, knowing that she was so rigorous, so meticulous. I mean, and this is the thing among the ways in which she's underrated, and this actually similar with Hansberry, right? These women were scholars, right? They weren't academics, but they were scholars. They were serious researchers, serious intellectuals, and artists. And so I wanted that part to show too, because so often, in particular, I think this happens to everybody, but in particular, Black women, we get circumscribed to these tiny little boxes of who we are, and every creative Black woman that I've ever encountered uh, defies categorization,
Talk
right?
about
Is
it.
reaching, right,
Talk
for
about
every
it.
we need. And so I want, so I was like, okay, so here we're going to let her tell her story, her imagination, her curiosities, her love of language, her being an intellect, her passion for Black people all over the globe, um, her interest in drawing the connections, and the way that I mean, what's so amazing, what you just to resonate with what you said before is that, right, she writes in a way that is authentic to Blackness, but it's her language, it's her form, right? So that, it's that which is so hard. Like, I think if any writers are watching or will watch this conversation, you know how hard it is to write dialogue, right? Period, right? To recount dialogue. That she can write, she could write speech that sounds like speech, but it's also, that it's her, right? It almost defies comprehension how a person could do that.
Yeah.
And so the selection was about sort of trying to capture the fullness of who she was and a journey, and also pieces that I thought were of extremely high quality, right? She was prolific. She published a lot. So there was, right, like so much. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. For real. Like, everyone knows about For Color Girls Who've Considered Suicide When Rainbow's Enough. Like, everyone knows about that. And I remember when I first read that and I was like, what is this? I'm so confused. But since I've been working, since I started the library in 2015, I feel
mhm,
like there was a time when I would just randomly find a new title by like Lillian, Betsy
yes.
Brown,
Oh,
Some Sing, Some Cry, and then Wild Beauty. I'm like, this woman was getting busy,
yes. Yes.
prolific,
Prolific. Yes. Prolific.
incredible.
And prolific, and also not playing the conventional games and of the
Not,
world, and also in community and generous and like in relationship with other writers and with actors and with musicians. And so she was she wasn't self-involved. She wasn't just in her corner writing her stuff. She was with people, you know. I mean, it
Yeah,
just, yeah. So,
I love that. Somebody said, "Who's the author we're talking about?" We're talking about Ntozake Shange
yes, into
and Sing a Black
Ntozake
Girl Song. And then it looks like there's a question in here. I never really do anything like this, so I'm new to
I
this. I
don't
hope
know how
I
to do it, so we're together.
don't. Oh, this person actually
Yes.
asked this similar question to what I asked, which is, how do you determine what is sacred that it isn't for public
Yeah.
consumption? You are expanding their bearing of witness. What does it mean to you to select what is shared? That's kind of similar to the question I had. I don't know if you want
Yeah.
to share a little bit more in
No,
response.
I do think yes. I mean, I tried to one be consistent with the kinds of things that she published previously, so not to allow any of the pieces to reveal anything that she hadn't decided to reveal in her life. Um, and they were pieces that were clearly art pieces. You know, so there are pieces that are that are similar to writing that was in her journal, but that was much more sort of clearly journal writing versus her effort to craft a kind of art piece. And that's, you know, that's a subjective assessment, right? So, you know, another editor might have thought about that differently. But I did not, because this was not a biography, I did not pursue it in the way that I would a biography, which is, you know, where you actually say, okay, I found some things out, and now I have to decide how to tell this story.
Mm.
You know, so that this was not that. I do think that she deserves a really comprehensive biography. I think that that will be, whoever pursues it, that will be in some ways, I wouldn't say the work of a lifetime, but it's going to be a long work because she was so prolific and had so many connections with so many people and
Yeah,
was so brilliant. It's gonna, I mean, it that's going to be a serious undertaking.
yeah, that's going to be a brick.
Yeah, you brick. I like that.
That's going to be a
That's
beautiful. That's
fantastic.
going to be a beautiful brick. Yeah, shout out to that person, whoever you are.
Yeah.
That was an amazing question. Thank you to whoever put that in the little question box. Let me see what this says. Oh, thank you for addressing this. You're welcome. The person said thank you. Awesome.
Oh,
Um, yeah, so I have two more questions. One of them is
okay.
kind of connected to what we're talking
Mhm.
about. And I'm not sure if you're going to think it's a personal question.
Okay.
You don't have to answer if you don't want to, of course. But I'm curious about the fact that you're doing the type of this person who's doing all this really generous, sacred, powerful research around Black history, Black womanhood, Black people. Do you think that that has an influence
Mm.
on other parts of your life, the work that you do? Your parenting, your friendships,
Yeah.
your the way you the way you relate your labor, your boundaries, etc. That's the question.
Yes. It has a huge impact.
Okay.
I mean, I'll say in a couple of ways. I think one of the things I realized, you know, as a younger person, I had an idealized idea about what it meant to be a parent, and which I almost certainly was going to fail at. And what I learned was that I had to figure out how to be uh, what I considered to be what my children felt was a good parent given who I am. And so part of that has actually consisted of bringing my children into the questions that are in the work about what does it mean to create, what is the thing that we have to do to make our Black lives not just livable but joyful, what role creativity has in that, how to be honest about our vulnerabilities, all of these things that are present in the work. So I talked to my children through writing about Lorraine. I talk to my children through writing about the South. I talk to my children through, encountering these gorgeous pages of,
I love that.
and I think that's, and then I think it also, it shapes my So I'll give you, here's actually an intimate detail that I'm going to share. So I have siblings who I didn't grow up with, who are children of my biological father, who I didn't, was not the man who raised me. And one of my brothers has a sister with whom he shares a mother, right? And there was a poem in the papers that Ntozake wrote to his sister's father, and so I sent it to him, and it was one of those moments where you're like, and I said, "Oh, send this to your other big sister," right? And it was one of those moments where you like realize, yeah, these are people. We think of these people as kind of like, in a kind of starstruck way, but there were people who, he was a musician. She loved his music, and she wrote about it, right? I mean, it's like, which is like real life. And I tell my friends things like this, right? Because if people will talk about, oh, I can't believe I'm dealing with it. Like, here's another example that I love. It's not about Ntozake Shange, but at when the introduction, I think it's to Sula, where Toni Morrison is talking about like having no money and trying to and how it was so laughable. Like she couldn't even figure out how to function. She's trying to feed these children. And I'm like, I say that to my friends all the time because I'm like, we just have to remember that like, this is just what it is, right? This is what it is. This life's what it is. And so I feel like they actually give me an access point to being affirming to people I love in an interesting way.
Yes. I love that. Yeah, I'm always confused by people who are like trying to make it seem like they have their work life and then everything else. It's hard for me to not intertwine the two.
Yeah, no.
If I'm reading, I'm researching, I'm studying, even this conversation, like I spoke to my daughter this morning and I was like, I'm talking to Imani Perry tonight on Instagram, and they were like, oh, wow, that's so cool. Because we came to see you speak at a Pen America event.
Okay.
And it was lovely. But there's another question in here. I like this little question function. It says, Dr. Perry, you are an extraordinary human, and I feel so grateful for all of your work. If you're willing to share, what felt hardest for you when creating this book? What challenged you? Or what parts of the process, if any, pushed you to stretch or challenge yourself? People coming through with the question.
Yeah, it's such a phenomenal question. I the hardest part, it's hard to it's encountering the moments that were hard for her. It just, even when they're really familiar, like it just breaks your heart, because we just so often wish that Black women didn't have to go through so much.
Yeah.
That's and it was after, and it's also seeing it after she's like changed the world of theater and art, after she's done. And this happens all the time, but like when I'm in archives, I'm like, even after, like the whole world knows that this person has forever changed American theater, American literature, and she's still going through it, that's hard. I forget the other part of the question. What's the other part of the question? Wait. It was.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. Yeah, what challenged you? What pushed you to stretch yourself? I think you answered the question. Yeah.
Oh, what?
Oh, I didn't know I could show it on the screen too.
And what pushed me to stretch myself. I mean, I think, you know, honestly, again, it seems strange to say, because I should stop saying this, but I'm not a theater person, right? I am, like, I love theater. I've been going to theater my whole life, but I'm not a theater scholar. And so, and yet now here I am with another work of this really important playwright.
Iconic dramaturge.
Right. And yeah, right. And so that was, and similar with Hansberry, I said, well, there's things that I won't necessarily be fantastic at understanding, given that that's not my background, but I want to settle into the things that I do know, which is I was very familiar with what she had studied and the books that she read and the music that she's in conversation with and the dancers, right? That part. But I did wind up pushing myself to try to get at a deeper level what she was, you know, to try to understand what she's was trying, what she was pushing formally in terms of theater, only because that was important to get a hold of in order to make decisions about what should be included, right? To say, oh, we do want some of these short plays in, because even though she really wasn't writing plays as much later in life, there was a relationship between how that form changed for her and who she's talking to, right? Like there's a way in which, you know, there's as with Hansberry, there's references to Beckett that are subtle, Samuel Beckett that are subtle in her work. And, you know, that kind of stuff I had to sort of try to learn. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's been half an hour, so I think we're good.
We're good. I'm so grateful.
I'm so grateful for you. I think my last question, which is probably a short question, is like this title. I love the title, Sing a Black Girl Song. And I know it's an excerpt from her work, but I also love that phrasing because it's like so specific and it could mean so many things.
Yeah.
So, oh wait, there's another question. Let me see what this person says. What most surprised you in your study of her archive? That's a good question.
Oh, I think what most surprised me was that there was so much that was unpublished because she had published so much. I mean, and it similar with Hansberry again, like, and I think people, you know, I mean, Black women be working, right? Like the sort of prolific, I think, and so often we mute it for ourselves because we say, oh, well, I was just doing, you know, that for this person. I was just doing this to try to work through this, or I was just doing, but like I mean, just was so much work, and it wasn't.
She was so busy.
She was busy.
She was so busy, even after having 2 strokes, and then she re-taught herself how to talk and use the voice recorder to write new pieces at the age of 70. I'm like,
amazing.
Ooh, child.
Collaborating. And part of what for me about, you know, I was only in her presence a couple of times, was she was, and this is probably not the right word because she was extraordinary, but she was regular, right? Like she wasn't, there were no airs. Like the first time I ever saw her, I was a kid and I was with my mom's friend Carol, and who had been in a dance group with her, and she was like, "Hey, girl!" And you know, they hugged and they were laughing. And I was like, "Oh!" Like and then years later, seeing her at the celebration of Black writing here in Philly at the Art Sanctuary again, like she was a sister. I mean, and yeah, and also so regular and totally extraordinary.
Yeah, one of my favorite Ntozake Shange stories is this interview that I watched on YouTube way back when. I'm not sure if it's still up. If it is, I'll make sure to put the link in the comments. But when she talks about how she prepared herself for writing, how she would like take a bath and put on a nightgown and some perfume and a little makeup to sit down and write. I was like, oh, I like that. I think I'm gonna have to, You know, just seeing writing as this like moment to really get in touch with herself in a really sexy way.
Yeah.
That really touched me, and that stuck with me. It still sticks with me. Okay, these people are coming through with the questions. Oh, someone asked, would you consider writing her autobiography?
I don't think that will be me, but I would never say never. I mean, I just would like, I think it should be done. One of the things I'm learning is that sometimes you step back from things that are super exciting to you because you know that there's somebody else who's more equipped to do the work. And that's been the case with several.
Ooh, that's a word. That's a word.
Yeah, so I don't think.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Speaking from someone who gets offered the strangest and coolest opportunities, I'm learning. I'm like, there was a time when I would say yes to everything because it just sounds so amazing. But
Right,
then
yeah.
you come to find out, like, no, actually, this task was not meant for me. Let me find somebody who it's meant for and support them in making it happen.
Yeah.
So that's a word right there. That's a word. I've felt that because I think I just got caught up in this like whole year of yes thing and just saying yes to everything.
Right.
But
And
yeah,
there's
so
life where that's a meaningful exercise, right? Because you say, I say this to my kids all the time, I'm like, I want you to be yes sayers to life, right? Because you don't know. Some stuff feels intimidating and you should embrace it because you want to experiment. But then you also have moments where you have to pull back, right? And it's like,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you learn by doing. At least I've learned by doing. I've
Yeah.
learned what I'm like, okay, this feels like a challenge, but I'm open to it. I.e. this conversation. Oh my God. This is a perfect example. And I really enjoyed it so much. It was so awesome.
I'm
So
grateful
yeah.
for you in every way. Thank you for this, but thank you for your whole being, your brilliance, your generosity, your vision, all of it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to save this video and I'm going to post it to the YouTube channel in case anybody who missed the beginning wants to watch it. And I'm going to say thank you to everybody who tuned in. If you're in Brooklyn, come to the Free Black Women's Library this weekend for a writing workshop and a farmer's market and some harvesting in the garden. And yeah, wishing everyone an amazing, amazing weekend. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.